Good evening. I'm your host, and this is Kenya News Update today. We begin with a developing crisis in the capital. The Kenya Defense Forces have been deployed across Nairobi as unprecedented flooding has turned major roads into rivers and residential estates into islands. This is a 12-minute deep dive into the emergency response, the underlying causes, and the broader geopolitical context that may be influencing Kenya's capacity to respond. We'll examine the immediate facts on the ground, analyze the government's strategy, and debate whether this disaster is purely meteorological or a symptom of deeper systemic vulnerabilities. Let's get started. Our top story. Military boots are on the wet ground. At 9:15 a.m. this morning, following an emergency cabinet session chaired by President William Ruto, the Kenya Defense Forces, or KDF, were formally mobilized to support the National Disaster Operations Center. The NDOC, this is not a routine deployment. The directive came after 24 hours of relentless rainfall that has officially been classified as a national disaster for Nairobi County. Initial reports from the NDOC indicate that over 120 personnel from the KDF's engineering brigade have been dispatched, equipped with high-water vehicles, inflatable boats, and heavy-duty pumps. Their primary mission zones are the hardest-hit areas: South Sea, where water levels reached 1.5 meters, the Nairobi West informal settlements, and sections of Mombasa Road near the Bellevue area, which has been completely impassable since 10 p.m. last night. The county government reports that at least 15 major roads are currently closed, causing a traffic paralysis estimated to have cost the city's economy 500 million shillings in lost productivity today alone. Let's look at the scale. The Nairobi County Meteorological Department recorded a staggering 95 millimeters of rainfall in a single 12-hour period between 8 p.m. on March 6th and 8 a.m. on March 7th. To put that in perspective, that's nearly 60% of the average total rainfall for the entire month of March, delivered in half a day. The Nairobi River, which snakes through the city, has burst its banks in 6 separate locations. Satellite imagery analyzed by our team shows floodwaters covering an estimated 12 square kilometers of urban and peri-urban land. The human cost is still being tallied. As of 6 p.m. this evening, the Kenya Red Cross has confirmed the evacuation of over 3,200 individuals to temporary shelters set up in schools and community halls across 8 sub-counties. Tragically, there are 5 confirmed fatalities, and rescue teams are searching for at least 18 people reported missing, primarily from the Mathare and Mukuru Kwa Engen Ga informal settlements. The county's ambulance service has responded to over 200 flood-related emergency calls. Now, to the response. The deployment of the military raises immediate questions about the capacity of civilian disaster agencies. We have to ask, why was the military needed? The National Disaster Operations Center has an annual budget of 2.5 billion shillings. It coordinates a network that includes the county's fire brigade, the Red Cross, and various NGOs. Yet, within hours of the crisis peaking, the civilian apparatus was overwhelmed. Critics point to a chronic underinvestment in urban drainage infrastructure. A 2024 audit by the Nairobi City County Assembly revealed that only 35% of the city's planned drainage upgrade projects, valued at 15 billion shillings, were completed in the last fiscal year. The remaining 65% were either delayed or shelved due to budgetary reallocations. Furthermore, the county's fleet of 10 specialized flood rescue vehicles was reportedly down to just 4 operational units at the start of the rains, with the others awaiting spare parts for an average of 5.5 months. This brings us to a critical debate. Perspective 1, from the government's side, argues this is an unprecedented, freak weather event that no city could fully prepare for. The Cabinet Secretary for Interior, speaking from the NDOC headquarters, stated, "The intensity and speed of this downpour exceeded all our models. The decision to bring in the KDF was a proactive, decisive move to save lives, not an admission of failure. Their logistical chain, discipline, and equipment are a force multiplier we are grateful to have." This view is supported by data showing that rainfall in March 2026 is already 180% above the 30-year average for this period. The argument is clear. This is about climate, not competence. But there is a second, more critical perspective. Analysts and urban planners counter that the flooding is a direct result of systemic governance failures. They point to rampant, unregulated construction on wetlands and riparian reserves that act as the city's natural sponges. A 2025 study by the University of Nairobi's Urban Planning Department estimated that 40% of Nairobi's wetland cover has been lost to development in the last 15 years. Furthermore, the maintenance of existing drainage is sporadic at best. Only 20% of the city's primary stormwater drains were cleared in the pre-rain season maintenance drive concluded last month. A senior hydrologist who wished to remain anonymous told us, "We map the flood zones every year. They are predictable. The water has nowhere to go because we have paved its escape routes and built homes in its natural pathways. Calling the army is a crisis response, not a solution." This internal crisis unfolds against an unstable global backdrop that is quietly stretching Kenya's resources. While our soldiers are pulling families from rooftops in Nairobi, the Kenyan military, a key contributor to regional peacekeeping, is also monitoring multiple international flashpoints. This is where a seemingly distant conflict becomes strategically relevant. The ongoing military confrontation in the Middle East, while geographically remote, has tangible local effects. For instance, global oil price volatility directly impacts the cost of fuel for the KDF's vehicles and the Kenya Red Cross's generators. More subtly, it consumes diplomatic and security intelligence bandwidth at the highest levels of government. President William Ruto's administration, like that of President Donald Trump in the US, must balance domestic catastrophe with international obligations and alliances. The Libya case study is instructive. The power vacuum and migrant crisis stemming from the NATO intervention in 2011, which ultimately led to the rise of figures like Khalifa Haftar, demonstrate the long-tail consequences of foreign intervention. These consequences don't stay contained. They ripple outward, affecting regional stability and migration patterns that East African nations, including Kenya, must manage. The surge in migrant arrivals to Italy and Greece noted in mid-2025 often has its origins in instability that Kenya helps contain through its participation in African Union missions. Every soldier and shilling committed abroad is one less available for domestic resilience. Kenya's annual defense budget is approximately 150 billion shillings. While the bulk is for salaries and domestic security, a significant portion supports international peacekeeping commitments. The question for debate is whether a nation facing existential domestic threats from climate-induced disasters should reconsider the scale of its international military engagements. Let's visualize the resource challenge. The immediate financial cost of this flood response is enormous. The National Treasury has already authorized an emergency expenditure of 1.2 billion shillings for the first phase of the operation. This breaks down into several key areas. The largest single expense is for emergency humanitarian aid, including food, blankets, and medical supplies, accounting for 400 million shillings. The second is infrastructure repair, primarily for roads and bridges, allocated 350 million shillings. Logistics and fuel for the multi-agency response, including the KDF, are budgeted at 250 million shillings. The remaining 200 million shillings is for temporary shelter management and water purification efforts. This is just the initial outlay. A comprehensive damage assessment will take weeks, but early projections from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers suggest total economic losses could exceed 8 billion shillings, factoring in property damage, business interruption, and lost agricultural yield in the city's periphery. Looking ahead, what is the path to resilience? Experts we consulted propose a three-pillar strategy. First, there must be an immediate, legally enforced moratorium on any construction within identified riparian and wetland zones in Nairobi, with a dedicated enforcement task force. Second, the city requires a massive, multi-year investment in a modern, integrated stormwater management system, funded through a combination of county revenue, national government grants, and climate adaptation financing from international partners. Third, and perhaps most critically, Kenya needs to decentralize its disaster response capacity. The current model is too Nairobi-centric. County governments across the nation need their own equipped and trained rapid response units so that a crisis in Kisumu or Mombasa doesn't require waiting for directives and assets from the capital. In conclusion, the images of soldiers navigating flooded streets are a powerful symbol of a state responding to crisis. But they should also be a sobering reminder. A nation's military is its ultimate contingency tool. When it becomes a primary responder to a predictable seasonal challenge, it signals a profound failure in planning and prevention. The floods in Nairobi are a local emergency with global echoes. They test our infrastructure, our governance, and our priorities in a world where climate and conflict are increasingly intertwined. The real measure of success in the coming days will not just be how many people are rescued, but what concrete funded plans emerge to ensure that when the next rains come, and they will, the first responders are city engineers in yellow vests, not soldiers in camouflage. This has been a Kenya News Update Today deep dive. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for continued coverage.